squad is 1084 at Fisk Tower. All units stand by. Warrant is en route.
Sorry, Toby, but there's a brand new King of Swing in town. Anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another really interesting Spider-Man PS4 related video. And if you can already tell from the thumbnail, I think you can already tell which direction this video is going. Now, in case you've missed it, I've already done 2 videos discussing about this particular topic in the past. The first one was all the way back during the E3 2017 demo of Spider-Man PS4, titled Breaking Down How Spider-Man PS4's Web Swinging Will Beat Spider-Man 2's. And then I went on to do a follow-up video discussing about how I believe Spider-Man PS4's web swinging is guaranteed to beat Spider-Man 2's after seeing all the footage that was provided by Game Informer. And along with playing the entirety of Marvel's Spider-Man myself, along with having a fully upgraded Spidey to swing around New York City with, I can guarantee you that Spider-Man PS4's web swinging surpasses that of Spider-Man 2. And in this video, I'm going to break down as to why that is the case. Now, of course, there have been a plethora of open-world Spider-Man games, ranging from the more lackluster ones such as the Amazing Spider-Man series to the more noticeable ones of Ultimate Spider-Man and my personal favorite of Web of Shadows. However, for this particular video, we are going to specifically analyze the traversal mechanics in Spider-Man 2, which the majority of people consider to be the best Spider-Man game, and Spider-Man PS4, which in my opinion has surpassed everything that Spider-Man 2 has had to offer. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying that Spider-Man 2's web swinging is bad by any means, but in comparison to Marvel's Spider-Man, you can definitely see some major improvements between both games. And obviously, there's also the factor to take in as to when both of these games were made, specifically for Spider-Man 2, made all the way back in 2004, and Spider-Man PS4 just released recently this year in 2018. So starting off with the most realistic factor relating to both games' traversal is that luckily each game's form of web swinging is fully physics and momentum based, and the webs indeed attached to buildings. This is something that the previous open-world Spider-Man games could never come to replicate. While there were other open-world Spider-Man games that did have webs attached to buildings, like in Ultimate Spider-Man, Web of Shadows, and even Spider-Man 3, it could never fully replicate the momentum that Spider-Man 2 and even Spider-Man PS4 have. Every time you shoot out a web line in Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man PS4, you always get the sensational rush of traversing throughout the city just like Spider-Man would. Not only do these mechanics make for a really well-crafted traversal system, but it also makes it more realistic for the player when getting around town. And even though some of the other open-world Spider-Man games do feature fun traversal, they can't come close to replicate its realism like they do in Spider-Man 2 or even Spider-Man PS4. And relating to another mechanic that both games equally share in a great way is the charge jump feature. Given how the charge jump feature was essential for getting around town in a really fast-paced way within Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man PS4 actually uses it as an upgrade. And even though you may unlock this skill later on when playing through Spider-Man PS4, the charge jump feature is still as satisfying as it was to use back in the Spider-Man 2 days. This amazing mechanic allows Spider-Man to jump over several buildings within a single bound. And even though you'll have the time of your life swinging around New York City, it's just as fun to jump over multiple buildings and land in a very stylish arachnid pose. And when you manage to incorporate the charge jump within your traversal, things get even more fast-paced than they already were before. And as you can see, both these games use these features in some really innovative ways, all while inputting them to their max potential. But even though both of these games master the basics on how to craft a good web swinging system, it's very clear to see that Spider-Man PS4 has topped everything that Spider-Man 2 had to offer. So starting off with a very simple and yet very satisfying mechanic that was implemented first within Spider-Man 2 is the accessibility of air tricks by pressing X while falling in midair. While it was very gratifying to pull off some air tricks within Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man PS4 has easily topped them next to nothing. You see, in Spider-Man 2, you had the option to either spam X in order to do some very acrobatic flips, or wait until pressing X again to do some dive twirls. But for Spider-Man PS4, Insomniac managed to do something way more intricate. In order to pull off air tricks within Spider-Man PS4, you have to press and hold triangle and circle at the exact same time while moving the left analog stick in a certain direction. Not only will this allow you to pull off some very flexible moves, but you can also switch your trick while in midair whenever you feel like by switching the left analog stick's direction. And alongside of that, you can pull off air tricks while in the middle of a dive and also gain experience points by pulling each one off successfully. successfully. This is hands down a very insightful incentive from Insomniac towards the player. Not only are you rewarded with experience points after pulling off each successful air trick, but you also are influenced to master the swinging in order to perfect it even more. And moving on to another aspect that Insomniac improved upon slightly is the wall running feature from both games. The one slight problem with Spider-Man 2's wall running mechanic is that as you continue to run up a building, Spider-Man would start to slow down over time. While this is a very realistic approach to wall running, it still ended up breaking the momentum of traversal when getting around New York City in that game. In Marvel's Spider-Man, you still end up slowing down during the wall run, but the addition towards this is that you can press X during the wall run to zip yourself up the building and gain more momentum. And as a bonus, if you reach the very top of a building and press X just at the right time, you can slingshot yourself across the rooftop to gain even more speed and continue your swinging down to the streets below. This allows the player to keep their speed and momentum intact, along with discovering new maneuvers to traverse around New York City with. And speaking of mechanics that improves players' speed and momentum is the wonderful improvement of the web zip feature within Spider-Man PS4 compared to Spider-Man 2. Where the charge jump was an upgrade within Spider-Man PS4, the web zip was the same thing for Spider-Man 2. And once you unlock this ability, you could press L2 and R2 simultaneously to zip yourself forward, which would eventually lead into you web swinging. While this was a great feature within Spider-Man 2 and was vastly improved as time went on, it wasn't used to the best of its capabilities in that game compared to how it was used perfectly within Spider-Man PS4. Even though you could web zip in Spider-Man 2, it didn't really send you that far throughout the city, and also it ended up slowing you down once starting a web swing. You could have used the web zip mechanic to go up a building faster in Spider-Man 2, but you could have done the same thing by using the wall run feature or even using the charge jump feature. Whereas in Spider-Man PS4, Insomniac have absolutely perfected the web zipping in more ways than one. And the main reason being is that there are two different versions of web zipping in Spider-Man PS4 that both allow you to traverse throughout the city in a really fast-paced way. The primary form of web zipping is pressing L2 and R2 simultaneously at a specific perch point and then pressing X once you hit that perch point to boost yourself off of it to gain lots of momentum. And the second method of zipping is to simply press X to web yourself forward in order to gain more momentum. And if that wasn't enough, there's also an upgrade for both of these forms of web zipping. For the primary way of web zipping, you could press L2 and R2 to go on a specific perch point, but if you land at the point at just the right time and press X exactly once you land on it, you get a major boost of speed in order to zip through the city even faster. And as for the midair zipping, when you press X, you can also press it a second time once getting an upgrade in order to do it twice and not break your momentum while in midair. This allows the player to pinpoint their trajectory when swinging throughout the city, almost making it like an equation and deciding exactly where you want to go and how you want to get there. Where Spider-Man 2 mainly provides a very well-rounded web swinging system, Spider-Man PS4 gives you lots of variety when zipping, swinging, and doing lots more throughout the city. However, that doesn't mean that Spider-Man PS4 doesn't have its faults when it comes to the traversal. A couple things that Spider-Man 2 has that Spider-Man PS4 does not have is the inclusion of swinging off of poles and also doing loop-de-loops when swinging. Now, in my opinion, the best form of pole swinging has to go to Web of Shadows, but Spider-Man 2 did it first in a really cool way. If you're ever near a lamppost in Spider-Man 2, you can press and hold circle to swing off of it in order to do some very stylish tricks on that lamppost. And mixing that move in with the charge jump can get you some serious distance when swinging throughout the city. And while this feature didn't have to be in the game, it was amazing seeing Spider-Man pull off some amazing loops throughout the city within Spider-Man 2's web swinging. Not only would you feel great after pulling a loop-de-loop off, but you would also gain some major speed when doing one successfully. But even though Insomniac lacks these features in their game, Spider-Man PS4 makes up with lots of variety when getting around town. And this relates to some of my favorite features in the game relating to the parkour system, along with the Webb Tunnel and the dive bomb. If there's ever any object within Peter's way in Spider-Man PS4, you can always parkour over it with ease and go simply back into web swinging. Not only does this go for parkouring over objects on top of buildings, but also parkouring over objects on the side of buildings as well with fire escapes. If there's an object in your way while wall running, Peter will automatically vault over it and continue the wall run with the same momentum he had before. And that also goes for one of my favorite mechanics in the game with the Webb Tunnel. If you ever manage to stumble upon a giant construction cylinder or a water tower with a big gap in it, you can always zip right through the hole and go right back into swinging with ease. And while it may take a while when pulling off some of these moves seamlessly, it still is very rewarding when doing each one perfectly. And as for the coup de grace of Spider-Man PS4's traversal system, has to go to the dive bomb, where you can control it manually or automatically however you feel like. Whenever you're falling from a great height in Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man PS4, PS4, Peter will dive towards the streets below with lots of speed and momentum. And for Spider-Man 2, when you dive bomb towards the streets below and swing at the very last minute, you'll get some major height within the city. But for Spider-Man PS4, you can manually make Spider-Man dive either faster or slower depending on how you control his moves. If you jump off a building normally, Spider-Man will dive and you can have the ability to twirl when diving as another air trick. This will be cool for sure to pull off, but you won't go as fast as you normally would if you press down on the L3 button to make Spider-Man dive with lots more velocity. Not only do you get a very cinematic angle of Spider-Man when he's dive bombing, but you also get a very fast-paced feeling of swinging at the very last second when pulling off a very stylish move. And if you manage to mix, match, and perfect all these mechanics within Spider-Man PS4's traversal system, you can definitely become the pro web slinger we all wish we could be. Granted that Spider-Man 2 was the very first open-world Spidey game ever made, it still had some mechanics within its traversal system that felt a bit stiff compared to how fluid it is now within Spider-Man PS4. And with the addition of motion blur and particle effects implemented within Spider-Man PS4's web swinging, you feel even more connected to Spidey than you've ever felt before. And even though both games feature an outstanding traversal system, in my opinion, I still think Spider-Man PS4 has finally been able to dethrone Spider-Man 2 as the greatest Spider-Man game ever made, both in terms of story, combat, gameplay, and of course, its web swinging. But anyways, guys, that's the video that I have for you today, and thank you all so much for watching, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think about Spider-Man 2's web swinging after having played Spider-Man PS4, and which system do you think is better? Do you think that Spider-Man 2 is still the #1 traversal system in any Spidey game, or do you think, like I do, in which Spider-Man PS4 has managed to defeat it? But still, everybody, please let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below, because I would love to hear what all you think about this. And without further ado, everybody, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Peace out.
Come on, come on! They shut the elevators down! Take the stairs! I prefer a more direct approach.
Cool Spidey outfit.
Thanks.